Welcome back to Beyond the Badge. Some promises are made in warmth and forgotten in comfort, but the most powerful promises are made in the cold. Chicago, 1998. Winter had wrapped the city in silence. Snow clung to sidewalks in uneven piles, hardened by days of footsteps and nights of freezing wind. Outside an aging public elementary school, the iron fence rattled softly as gusts pushed through it. Curled beside that fence sat a boy no older than 10. His name was Isaiah Cole. His coat was 2 sizes too large, the zipper broken halfway down. His hands were bare, red and trembling. His lips were split from dehydration, and every breath burned his lungs. He hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. At first, hunger had been loud. It twisted and clawed at his stomach, but now it had become quiet. That quiet terrified him more than pain ever had, because quiet meant his body was giving up. Beside him, pressed tightly against his side, was a small German Shepherd mix. His fur was patchy and thin, his ribs visible beneath his skin, but his eyes were steady. The dog had chosen him. 3 nights earlier, Isaiah had found him digging through a trash pile behind a restaurant. The dog had growled at first, weak but defensive. Isaiah had simply sat down beside him. Neither had the strength to fight. Neither had the strength to leave, so they stayed together. Isaiah called him Shadow, not because the dog followed him, but because the dog stayed when everyone else disappeared. Children poured out of the school doors that afternoon, laughter filling the frozen air. Backpacks bounced against their shoulders. Parents waved from warm cars. No one stopped. No one asked. No one saw him. Isaiah lowered his head, resting it gently against Shadow's neck. "I'm sorry," he whispered faintly. "I wish I had something for you." Shadow lifted his head and licked Isaiah's cracked fingers, as if answering a question Isaiah had never spoken aloud. "I'm not leaving you." And then, someone stopped. Introduce main characters. On the other side of the fence stood a girl. She was small, maybe 9 years old, her deep brown skin glowing softly against the pale winter light. Her hair was braided carefully, each braid ending neatly and tied together at the back with a faded red ribbon. Her name was Naomi Carter. Her coat was worn at the elbows, her boots were scuffed at the toes. She carried a small lunchbox decorated with peeling cartoon stickers. Naomi knew what it meant to have just enough, and nothing more. Her mother worked night shifts at a nursing home. Her grandmother watched her while the heater clicked on and off depending on what bills had been paid that month. Naomi had learned early that survival wasn't loud. It was quiet. It was careful. It was shared. She noticed the boy immediately. Not because he asked, not because he cried, but because he didn't. He sat too still, like someone who had already accepted being forgotten. Her eyes moved to the dog beside him. Shadow watched her carefully, alert but too tired to stand. Naomi stepped closer to the fence. "Are you cold?" she asked softly. Isaiah hesitated. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to say everything. Instead, he whispered, "I'm okay." Shadow shifted, pressing closer into him, betraying the truth Isaiah could not say. Naomi slowly sat down across from him, the cold concrete seeping through her coat. She placed her lunchbox on her lap and opened it. Inside was a simple sandwich, peanut butter, her only meal until dinner. She stared at it for a long moment. Her stomach reminded her that she was hungry too. But then she looked at Isaiah, at his shaking hands, at the dog who refused to abandon him. She reached forward and pushed the sandwich carefully through the bars. Isaiah froze. He stared at it as if it might disappear. His throat tightened. Naomi didn't speak. She didn't rush him. She simply waited. Finally, Isaiah reached forward. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. "Thank you," he whispered. He took one bite, then another. Tears fell before he realized they were there. He broke off a small piece and held it to Shadow. Shadow ate gently, tail moving weakly against the snow. Naomi smiled softly. In that moment, 3 lonely souls became something else. They became seen. That day became 2 days. 2 days became weeks. Every afternoon, Naomi stopped at the fence. Every afternoon, she shared whatever she had. Sometimes half a sandwich, sometimes crackers, once an apple her grandmother had saved. Shadow always greeted her first, his tail wagging despite his weakness. Naomi began to talk more. He told her about the foster homes he had moved through, about nights when no one said goodnight, about mornings when he woke up unsure if anyone would remember his name. Naomi listened. She didn't try to fix him. She simply stayed. One afternoon, when the wind cut especially hard, she removed her gloves and pushed them through the fence. "I'll get new ones," she said, though she knew she wouldn't. Isaiah tried to refuse. She shook her head. Shadow rested his chin on her knee, accepting her as part of their fragile world. For the first time in months, Isaiah felt warm. Not because the cold had left, but because loneliness had. Present conflict/problem. Spring arrived slowly. Snow melted into dirty puddles. One morning, Isaiah wasn't there. Naomi waited after school, her lunch untouched in her bag. Shadow wasn't there either. Fear settled into her chest. Finally, a social worker approached the fence. "Are you Naomi?" the woman asked gently. Naomi nodded. Isaiah was placed in a foster home this morning. Naomi's throat tightened. Did he say anything? The woman hesitated, then handed Naomi a small object, a worn shoelace. Shadow's makeshift collar. "He didn't want the dog left behind," she said softly. The foster family agreed to take him too. Relief and heartbreak collided inside Naomi. At that moment, a car pulled up across the street. Isaiah stepped out briefly, escorted by the social worker. When he saw Naomi, he ran to the fence. Shadow barked softly beside him. Neither child spoke for several seconds. Finally, Isaiah whispered, "I didn't want to leave." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. He swallowed hard. "When I grow up and I'm rich, I'll come back for you." He didn't know what rich meant. He only knew it meant never being hungry again. Naomi removed the red ribbon from her hair. She tore it carefully in half. She tied one piece around his wrist. "So you don't forget." Isaiah held it like something sacred. "I won't," he promised. Shadow barked once, as if sealing the vow. Then the car door closed, and he was gone. Years passed. Foster homes came and went, some kind, some cold. Through all of it, Shadow stayed. He slept beside Isaiah on thin mattresses. He waited outside schools. He guarded him through nights filled with uncertainty. On evenings when Isaiah had nothing to eat, he shared his food with Shadow first, because Shadow had shared his warmth first. Every night, Isaiah touched the faded red ribbon tied around his wrist, and every night, he whispered into the dark, "I'm coming back." He studied harder than anyone else, worked after school, saved every dollar. He earned scholarships, went to college, started a small technology company in a rented apartment. It failed. He tried again. It failed again. Shadow grew older beside him, gray appearing around his muzzle. Still loyal, still present. Isaiah refused to quit, because somewhere in Chicago, a girl had believed he mattered, and he could not betray that belief. 22 years later, a black car stopped beside an old elementary school fence. Isaiah stepped out. Now, Ethan Cole, CEO of a successful company. His suit was tailored, his watch expensive, but his hands trembled. The fence was smaller than he remembered. Shadow, now slow and gray, stepped carefully beside him. They had both survived. Across the street, a woman helped a small foster child adjust her backpack. Her braids were shorter now, her posture stronger, but the same quiet compassion lived in her eyes. Naomi. She worked as a social worker, still helping children no one saw. Ethan walked toward her. Shadow limped gently beside him. She turned. Their eyes met. Time collapsed. Her voice barely escaped her lips. Isaiah. Tears filled his eyes. I told you I'd come back. Shadow wagged his tail weakly. She knelt, wrapping her arms around his neck. He remembered her. He had never forgotten. They walked together to the fence. Ethan rolled up his sleeve. The faded red ribbon still rested around his wrist. Naomi gasped, covering her mouth. I kept it, he whispered. She reached into her wallet, pulled out the other half. I did too. Shadow sat between them, a bridge between past and present. Ethan's voice broke. You saved my life. Naomi shook her head. You saved your own. He knelt slowly, not as a wealthy man, but as the hungry boy she had fed. I told you I'd marry you when I was rich, he said softly. I'm not hungry anymore. Silence filled the space between them. Naomi tied the ribbon around both their wrists. Yes, she whispered. Shadow barked once. They married beside that same fence. Children from Naomi's foster program lined the walkway. Shadow walked beside Ethan. Slow, proud, present. Months later, Shadow passed peacefully at Ethan's feet. His final breath calm, his final moment safe. A loyal witness to a promise kept. Ethan and Naomi created the Red Ribbon Foundation, providing food, shelter, and hope to children like Isaiah once was. Every year they visited the fence. And every year they remembered the dog who stayed and the girl who cared. Sometimes saving a life doesn't require strength, only kindness. Sometimes loyalty doesn't speak, it simply stays. And sometimes the smallest promise becomes the greatest destiny. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Beyond the Patch, because here we honor quiet heroes, loyal hearts, and the moments that prove compassion can change a life. Beyond every struggle, there is someone who chose to care. And that choice changes everything.